He was very good to me. He took care of me a lot when I was little. He used to take me hunting with him, and he was just generally,
Jewel was only 20 when he died a war hero. It happened 7,000 miles from home on a ridgetop in South Korea. Jewel's company was under attack and starting to give way when he rallied his squad and inspired them to launch a counterattack. The enemy retreated, the Marines held, thanks to Jewel. But in the final minutes of the battle, Jewel was killed. For his actions, Corporal Bruce posthumously received the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest military decoration for valor, second only to the Medal of Honor. He enlisted in the Marine Corps only 5 days after graduating from Mounds Township High School in 1948. He was a star athlete all 4 years. The hometown paper described him as a popular and ambitious youth who worked 2 part-time jobs.
He had a very outgoing personality. He was good at everything he did. He was like the star of the family. Everybody kind of looked to him for everything. He was an exceptional person.
Linda remembers a brother 12 years older who helped his busy mother by not only taking care of his baby sister, but also by helping everyone get along.
My dad was a very controlling person, and he was not really close to any of us kids. Jewel took care of my mother and did a lot of things for her. He was kind of like a buffer, I would say. That is me and Jewel.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Awesome.
That's me. That's where he used to carry me around all the time like that. So I was probably 5. Yeah, that's my dad, and that's John, and that's Jewel. Yeah, that's when they were both in the military, and they were both at home at one time. They weren't always home at the same time, but that's our driveway, yeah. And that's a picture of John and Jewel together. That's Jewel. He's standing out in front of, he worked at the movie theater, and he's standing out in front of it.
Like most Americans, Jewel could not have imagined the United States would go to war only 5 years after the end of World War II. But in June 1950, the Soviet-backed communist North Koreans invaded South Korea, starting a war that challenged the existence of the newly formed United Nations. President Truman ordered U.S. involvement as part of a UN response. UN forces responded, but the better-equipped North Koreans pushed them into the southeast corner of the peninsula. The place where Allied forces would stand and fight was called the Pusan Perimeter. In response to the developing crisis, the Marine Corps activated the 1st Provisional Marine Brigade and included Jewel's unit, Company B, 1st Battalion, 5th Marines. On July 3rd, Jewel writes his mother he has bad news. He's going to Japan. Jewel concludes the letter with, "Don't worry about me, because we won't go to Korea." Within a week of formation, the brigade boards multiple ships and sets sail for Japan. There, the Marines would train for an amphibious landing on the Korean peninsula. But during the voyage across the Pacific, orders changed. The situation in Korea was getting worse. The 1st Provisional Marine Brigade would now land in Korea and go directly into combat. Riding home aboard the USS Henrico, Jewel tells his parents he will arrive in Korea Wednesday afternoon. He then describes the unbearable heat and the seasickness among his fellow Marines. Jewel then asks his parents if they think the Korean War is the start of World War III. The letter was dated July 28, 1950. By Wednesday, August 2nd, Jewel was in South Korea. We hear from Jewel next 14 days later, on August 16th, when he writes his older sister Frances. By now, the 20-year-old has experienced combat. He tells his sister things he doesn't want repeated to his mother. "Boy, we have been having fun the last few days," he writes. "You can shoot the Reds like shooting fish in a rain barrel. You remember how I always shot birds with my rifle at home? Well, it's the same way here, but now the birds shoot back. I guess I would have cried like a baby if I hadn't gotten to come with the division. I know it's crazy, but when you've been taught to kill for 2 years and the chance comes, you want to try your luck. I'm really having a lot of fun," he wrote. "Don't say anything to Mother about what I've said because I've tried not to worry her any if I could help it. We are in a rest camp now and have been for the past 2 days. We are moving back to the front tonight. Have to close for now. Will write more the first chance I get. Love, Jewel." We know what happened 2 days later, August 18th, in a letter from Ernest Headley, a member of Jewel's squad, written to the Bruce family in October 1950. Ernest describes an enemy attack that began early on August 18th. He wrote that it was a fanatical attack, and he was sure they would have driven us off the ridge if it hadn't been for Jewel. Ernest wrote, "When the fighting became heaviest and elements of the company started to withdraw, Jewel got out of his foxhole, exposing himself to enemy fire, and led a counterattack. When we saw Jewel expose himself with no regard for his personal safety, we felt like cowards and immediately followed him as he led the counterattack. We finally succeeded in driving the enemy off the ridge, and it was in the last few minutes of the battle that Jewel was killed. He was at the head of his squad," he wrote, "and his squad was the lead squad in the platoon. Jewel was, without a doubt, the main inspiration that made our counterattack a success." On an April day in 1951, a Navy captain visited the Bruce family to present Jewell Bruce her son's Distinguished Service Cross.
Oh, they're pictures, yeah. Yeah, I remember that, yeah. Yeah, I remember that, yeah. Yeah, I remember the day that they came.
Can you talk about that, what you were thinking?
I just, yeah. Okay, you want to know what I remember about it? My mom got my clothes out. I was all ready. Well, I decided I was going to go outside for a while, and I was playing out in the driveway, and it had rained, and there was mud puddles out there. Well, I pushed the wagon, and I fell into a mud puddle. She was not happy with me that day.
Jewell would become president of the Gold Star Mothers in Southern Illinois, a patriotic group of women who have lost a son or daughter while serving in the United States military.
But I know she went to all the meetings, and she was in the parades, all the, the different days that they would have parades and activities for the veterans and everything.
You think that's some way for her to kind of relieve her grief a little bit, maybe?
Sure, I'm sure it was. And she was very proud of him, of her son, and what he had accomplished.
Every member of the Bruce household served in the military except for Linda and her mother. Clyde served during World War I. Frances was an Army nurse. John served in Europe as part of the Army of Occupation after World War II. Leslie spent 4 years in the Army. When Jewel's body was returned to the United States, John was the official military escort accompanying his brother's body home for burial in the Mound City National Cemetery. Larry served in the Marine Corps and then returned home and cared for Jewell until she died in 1978.
He never married. He stayed home with her, took care of her as she got older and everything. And Larry idolized Jewell. He went in the Marines because of Jewell, I'm sure. That was what my dad wore all the time, was these overalls. I know that it was very hard on my dad too, but I think it changed him in some ways. I think he was more difficult, to get along with, and I think things bothered him more.
Larry passed away in 2021 and is buried in the same national cemetery as Jewell and their father Clyde. When you think about Jewell, it's as if he spent his short life preparing for that moment on a ridge in South Korea in 1950. He was a star athlete, loved the outdoors, and was unafraid of hard work. He believed in sacrifice, and most importantly, he knew how to care for people, whether his baby sister at home or a squad of young Marines. Linda donated 2 family keepsakes to the Mound City Historical Museum in Mound City, Illinois. Eula May's gold star pin, she wore it practically every day. And Jewel's high school letter sweater. Linda tells us it was her mother's most cherished keepsake.